Alright guys, so we're back and this is part 2 of the dashboard series. So in this video we're going to be focusing primarily on functionality. In the first part of the video we focused merely on the UI, and we're pretty much already done with the whole UI already. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that we can actually, we can switch between every single route. And we're also going to make it so that we can also ensure that whenever we click on a guild, it'll update the route parameter, because we're going to need to use the route parameter to actually get the actual guild ID, so that we know when we make requests to the API, it's going to know which guild to update for, because we have the guild ID. Now, one thing that I did forget to do was I forgot to do something where I actually didn't make it so that the menu content is scrollable. So let me actually do that real quick. So we're gonna go into menu style, and I'm gonna simply just do overflow scroll. So it's pretty much the same thing as the sidebar style. And you can see we actually can scroll, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just set the scroll bar to display of none. If you want, you can update the scroll bar and make it look nice, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. And don't worry about this warning. I just purposely copied and pasted a bunch of the same stuff over and over again, just so I can get the the actual stuff, the actual data. But it's fine. So, whoops, let me go ahead and fix that. Alright, let's refresh. Alright, perfect. Alright, so now that we know that if we were to add more items here, it'll definitely have these nice scrolling effect. Okay, so what I want to focus on is I want to focus on functionality. Okay, so we need to make it so that whenever we click on these items, it's going to update the actual the route parameter. Now, to actually update the route parameter, we need to make it so that when we click on something, we're going to use history.push to push the actual route to the one that we want. So the first thing we're going to do is let's focus on the actual routes first, because we didn't even do that. So let's go over to, let's see, sidebar? No, not sidebar. I think it's menu. Yep, menu. Okay, and what we're going to do is for every single menu category item. Okay, so we have menu category and we have the menu category item. Now, menu category is just literally just to show which is which, what is what. Right? We don't really care too much about we don't really care too much about that. We want to care about these actual items over here. When we click on these items, it's going to take us to a different route. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that whenever we click on these items, it's going to navigate us. Okay, the way we do that is we're going to use we need to pass in the history prop. So I'm going to go over here to menu props, and I'm going to type history, and I want to have IntelliSense, so I'm going to just import history from history, so that way I can actually reference history.push with the IntelliSense. So now we got to go into app.tsx, because that's where we are rendering a menu, and we're going to use the use history hook, which comes from React Router DOM. Okay, this is just a hook that we can pass in, or the return value, we can pass that in to not sidebar but menu. We will pass into sidebar later though. I'm not sure what's going on over here. Oh wait, history, there we go. Okay, so now I'm not sure why. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now if I do props.history, I can reference push and a bunch of other methods and properties. But we're gonna go into menu category item, and we're gonna do on click. We're gonna register an on click event, and whenever we do click on something, click on the item, we're going to reference props.history.push, and we're going to push item.route. Or wait, no, sorry, route.path, sorry, completely forgot. Yeah, so the reason why it's route.path is because, remember, the route itself has the path, okay? So that's gonna, now if I refresh, you can see that we have the actual route. Okay, we have authentication, roles, commands, levels, and you can see it's 1, 2, 3 because we hard coded it to 1, 2, 3. If I change this to that, for example, you can see that it will just give me that ID. Alright, now if we wanted to actually get the route parameter, it's very easy. So what we can do is, let me go into dashboard page real quick, and let me go and just turn this so I can actually console log some props. Oh, I don't think that'll actually let me do that. And let me just log props. And let me refresh the page. Okay, so you can see over here we have this this object. You can see we have the history object as well. We also have match, and you can see over here that match.params.gilid. That's going to give that to us. So that itself is awesome. So we don't have to worry so much about actually, parsing the path name from the location object. We can just reference props.match, and then we'll be just fine. So yeah, I think that'll be fine though. But let's go ahead and leave that alone for now, and we'll leave it like this for now. Okay, so now that we're pretty much now that we know exactly what it is that we want to do, let's go ahead and actually do it. So right now we already have it set so that whenever we click on the path itself, or not the path, the route items, it will actually push the router. Okay, so you can see over here that for this one, this is going to obviously work just fine, muted, because we do have, I think we did that in the first part of the video. We have, yep, route gilid general muted, perfect. Okay, now we can obviously do the same thing for everything else. So for example, roles, we can do security roles, but obviously we would want to have our own pages. Okay, and let me just go ahead and do it for authentication. We're not going to do it for every single one. I just wanted to show you guys how it works. Okay, alright, so now the only thing we need to do next is we need to make so when we click on these icons, these guild icons, it's going to change the route for us. Now how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use what's called a context. Alright, so the React context API is very powerful. We can use it to pretty much share state between multiple different components without needing to pass, props all the way down. It's actually very easy, and it would be a perfect situation to use something like context for this. Okay, because we have global state. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll call this contexts. I'm going to go ahead and just create a file called guildcontext.tsx. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the guild type that we created from types. That is this type right over here. Again, that's just going to be our simple guild. Obviously, right now we only have 3 properties, but when we actually start fetching data from our API, we're going to need to actually expand this guild type. Okay, and I'm also going to go ahead and import a function, and we're going to import that from React. We're going to import the create context function. This is going to allow us to create a context. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a custom type. I'm just going to call this guild context type, and I'm going to go ahead and set the guild. This is going to be an optional field, and we're going to set guild. It's going to be a property, which is going to be a function. We're going to take this type and we're going to go ahead and use it because create context is a generic function. So we first create a guild context parameter, or not parameter, variable, sorry, and then we're going to call create context, and we're going to use angle brackets and pass in the guild context type, taking advantage of React's generics. And now we're going to set guild to undefined, and then set guild to just a empty function, or a function that does nothing. Okay, so obviously you don't have to do this, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I think it'd be a good idea to take advantage of it, because at least you're basically type annotating your stuff, which is, you know, if you're using TypeScript, it's good practice. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just export a new variable. And this is going to be the provider. So with context, you have what's called a provider, and then you have the consumer. The provider is going to be what we're going to use to wrap our component with the context. That's how it's going to make it available to our components. And when we want to actually use it, we're going to use the actual context itself. So we're going to do export default guild context, just like this. Actually, I could just do export guild context if I want to, like this. Personally, I like named exports compared to default exports. That's just a personal preference. Okay, so now that we have our context, the next thing that we're going to do is we need to go ahead and wrap our application at the top level. So I could do it inside index.tsx, but because we actually do need to have some state, because we want to be able to update the context from anywhere that it needs to. Now, realistically, we're going to be updating the context's value from the sidebar, and I think only the sidebar. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually wrap everything inside the app.tsx, okay, because we can actually create some state variables in here. So what I'll do is I'll first create a state variable called guild, and then I'll create the function that's going to be used to update the guild state variable. And to do this, we're going to use the useState hook, okay, and we'll leave that value empty. I'm going to type in for this, might as well, it'll be either a guild or undefined value. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and go right over here, delete all that, or cut that, and then we're going to import guild context provider. So remember, this is the provider. It's going to provide the context for all of our components. Now, you don't have to provide for all your components. You can provide for only certain ones, but we're going to provide for all of it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do value equals guild set guild. So because remember, we have two values, right? We're passing in the guild, which currently is undefined, and we're passing in the set guild function, which is going to be used to update the actual context. So when we actually call set guild from whatever component, it's going to update it at this level, and then it's going to basically have the new guild globally for all of our components. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is for sidebar, let's go to sidebar real quick, and let's go over here. Let me actually zoom out just a little bit. For sidebar, we're going to need to take in the history property, and I'm gonna go ahead and just import that from history. Okay, so we're gonna get an error right over here because it's saying that we need to pass in history in sidebar. Though I'm not sure why. Yeah, there we go. So we'll just pass that in there just like that. Okay, and now that we have done that, what we need to do next is we need to go into the sidebar, and we need to call use context, and we're going to pass in guild context just like that. Okay, so remember, use context is going to give us our two values, so it's going to give us the guild as well as set guild. Now we don't really need guild, but I'll just leave it like there. I'll leave it there for now. Now let me go ahead and just console log these two values real quick, just so you guys can see what it actually is. So you can see it's undefined, and you can see this is a dispatch action. Okay. Now if I go back to the code, and if I were to, let's just say if I wanted to, if I wanted to pass in a value for this, that would be the value of the guild. So for example, I want to do something like ID 123, name 123, and then avatar 123. You can see that we have that over there. Okay. Now, ideally, when we first load up the app, it's going to need to fetch data from the API. So this is going to be undefined. So it's only going to be defined when the user actually clicks on the guild icon. So what we're going to do is right over here, guild icon. We're going to make it so, first we're going to register an onClick. And we're simply just going to make it so that whenever they click on this guild icon, we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to set the guild. Okay, remember this set guild function is going to take in a guild. I feel like I should have type annotated this. I don't think I can actually do that because I don't think function is generic. I think maybe for this I can do that. I want to type annotate as much as I can, but I think it's because we have this type over here, which is why it's not letting me. So, or maybe I could just do something like this. I think maybe that will work. Okay, I'm not sure. If you guys know a way how I could type annotate this function so that it expects, let me know. I'm not sure why. I think maybe what I was doing up there would have worked. I'm just not sure. But it's not it doesn't matter though. Let's just pass in guild, okay? Let's pass in guild. And we're gonna go right over, let's see, right over here. Okay, so right over here, because we are providing these two values, so we're passing in guild and set guild, that's gonna be retrieved over here. We're gonna call set guild. Okay, now set guild over here, this is literally just this function over here, right? Because we have the property of the context. The names are the same. Like this function is the same as set guild, right? Obviously, I could have called this update guild, for example, and then I would have passed in set guild like that. Okay, don't let the names confuse you. That's like, for example, like I could have done something like set guild, right? This is the actual context property, and then this is the value. But because they're the same name, we can just pass in like this. Okay, if I name this something like set or update guild, obviously you'll see we'll have a red line. So the reason why is because we need to pass in update guild. Okay, I know some people might know that, some people might not. I just want to point that out so you guys don't get confused. Okay, okay, so we're gonna set the guild. And now you're going to see that if I actually start clicking on these now, you're going to see that the guild gets updated. Okay, you can see 123, 127, 130, 131. And now all we need to do is we need to reference the history object. And we're going to push /dashboard /guild ID. Okay. There we go, 127, 129, etc. Perfect. Okay. Now, one more thing that we're going to need to do is we want to make it so that when we click on these routes, it's going to change it for the actual ID that was selected, right? The whole point is to be able to select, one of these guilds, and once we select it, we can select any one of these values. If I select this one, it's just going to give me some random value. That's not good. And that's why context is so powerful, because now all I need to do is I need to go into our menu.tsx. I simply just import the use context, or the guild context, sorry. And in the menu, I'm not going to be updating anything at all. Okay, because we're not updating the guild at all in the menu. The only thing the menu is for is updating the current route of whatever menu item we're currently selecting. Okay, why is it complaining here? No idea what's complaining, but it's okay. Now in the menu, instead of passing in this hard-coded string, we're gonna do guild.id. Right now, if I go ahead, if I console log this, let's go over here. Oh wait, okay, so it's saying object is possibly undefined. Okay, that's fine. This is why TypeScript is nice, because it'll tell you, okay, it'll save you some headache sometimes. So it's telling you that object is possibly undefined. So, I mean, there's a couple ways you can fix this. One, you can either do this. It seems like that's not working. Or you can do this. I think this will work. Okay, now you don't want to do this because, like, this will actually throw an error. Because when we first load the page, guild is undefined. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, look, if there's no guild, we're going to return. And what exactly are we going to return? Well, we're just going to return menu style. We're going to return menu header. So this way we actually have our menu rendered, but it just doesn't have the actual routes shown. And I'm just going to say, please select a guild. And there you go. So if I select the guild, now it will actually update the guild. And you can see that over here, it's being rendered over here. And you can see that it'll show all of our data. Okay, that's pretty awesome. We're going to do the same thing for the dashboard as well. Okay, hopefully you guys can understand how powerful React Context is. Okay, so now we're going to go inside, let's see, dashboard. And we're going to do the same thing. So const guild, use context, guild context. And we're going to say, hey, look, if there is no guild, return. And we're going to do base page style, dashboard header. Please select a guild. So if I refresh, you can see my state gets, you can see that my state actually is resetted. But we can actually make it so that if we look at the actual route parameter, so let me just log props to the console real quick. If we look at the route parameter, we can make it so that if there's a parameter, what we can do is we could probably find that guild somewhere, and then we can update the guild from the dashboard page. So that way we don't have to, like, you know, keep on like clicking, obviously, like that, because obviously if I were to just directly visit this, it would say please select the guild. So that wouldn't be necessarily good for a user experience, but you can make it so that when we visit this, we take the route parameter, we find the guild from some central store. So that's where you can also use context again to store all of the guilds. So you can fetch all those guilds from the API. You can store it in a context, right? You can store it in a, you know, a context or an array of contexts. And yeah, so we're not going to do that in this video. I think we're going to focus on that later. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. So now if I refresh the page, select a guild, okay, you can see now the actual ID, the guild ID is actually being changed, which is good. Okay, if I refresh, please select the guild. Okay, and if I select everything, you can see all my routes are being selected, and you can see the route is dynamic. And the reason why the route is dynamic is because, well, in the menu, remember, we called menu items, and we passed in the guild ID, the dynamic guild ID, and that will basically return us the properly mapped routes. Okay, so we pretty much have a nice, you know, looking dashboard. And realistically, if you actually ever use Discord on browser, that's kind of what happens. Like if you click on a channel, you'll see that the channel ID gets updated. If you change the guild, you'll see the guild gets updated, and etc. Okay, so hopefully all of this stuff makes sense. I know context might be a new, you know, thing for you guys, but context has been out for some time, and I definitely do think it's worth learning how to use context because it can save you a lot of headache. So you don't have to, you know, use Redux if you don't really need to. You can use context, so you don't have to also, you know, pass down props over and over again. You can just simply use context. Okay, so at this point, we pretty much have a functional dashboard. So for example, if I were to select this guild, okay, and if I were to select guild prefix, on this page, if I update the prefix of the guild, it's going to update it for guild 123. If I go here, we're going to go to 124, muted, or guild prefix. This would update the guild prefix for guild ID 124. So now we can actually allow our users to update the settings for each bot per guild, okay? And that's pretty awesome. So hopefully all of this stuff makes sense. Alright, so one of the problems that I mentioned earlier is that if I try to refresh the page, let's say if we're on a valid guild ID, if I try to refresh, it's just going to keep asking us to select the guild. So I mean, ideally it's not really a huge deal, but it would definitely be a lot better if we could, you know, make it easier for our users to just directly go to the configuration by the ID. So what I'm going to do is in the code, let me go back over here, is I'm simply just going to make it so that when I fetch the guild, we're going to store it in a guild context store, and we're going to make it global to all of our components. The only component that's actually going to use it though are the components. I think it's the dashboard component most likely. Yeah, actually, yeah, I think, well, the dashboard component on all the other pages will use it. Okay, so let's go and just create the context first. So guild context or guild store context .tsx. And so for this context, it's going to be pretty similar to our guild context. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. And I'm going to go ahead and change the name to guild store context type. And then we're going to change this guild context to guild store context. And then instead of guilds, or instead of guild, we're going to set it to guilds, and that'll be an empty array. And this will be just an array of guilds, guild types. Okay, so I'm not sure why this is still, it's my Visual Studio Code being laggy. But now I'm just going to set the guilds, or we're going to change the function name to set guilds. Okay, oh wait, I forgot to do guilds, that's why. Okay, there we go. So that's pretty much our guild store context, okay? Instead of just it being a single guild, it's an array of guilds. We're going to go into app.tsx, and what we're going to do is we're going to provide that context now. So we're going to go, first let's go and create a state variable for our guilds. So we're going to name it exactly like our values from the context. So for use state, we're just going to make this an array of guilds, and then we'll just set it to an empty array. Now we're going to have a problem because right over here we have guilds being imported from mocks, and we have a state variable called guilds over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to mock guilds. So we're importing guilds as mock guilds, like as a new name. Okay, so when we pass in guilds to the sidebar, it's actually going to pass in this empty array right now because we currently have it empty, but don't worry, we're going to fix that. So when we pass in our array right now, it's going to be empty, but we're going to fix that once we actually set the guilds. So typically what we're going to do later on when we actually fetch data is we're actually going to fetch it from the app level. Now personally, I don't really like fetching data from the app level because I just personally like it, but we're going to fetch the guilds, and I think other things we'll fetch probably is the user. We might end up using GraphQL for the backend. I haven't really thoroughly decided what it is I want to use for the backend, but it's mostly going to be GraphQL, so that way we can just fetch everything all in one go, and we can just pass it to all the props very easily. Okay, so what I'm going to do though is I'm going to use the useEffect hook. So react.useEffect. And what we want to do essentially is we want to basically call set guilds or set guilds and then pass in mock guilds. So now when I do that, let me actually just go ahead and pass in an empty dependency list. You can see now that I have all my guilds. Okay, so it's working perfectly fine. All right, and I can also just console log something. Just say guilds. Okay, there we go. All right, so now that we have our guilds, that's great. Okay, but what we mostly need to do is we need to make it so that when we go to dashboard, what we want to do is we want to get the route parameter, the guild ID over here. We want to get the guild ID, and we want to find the guild from this guild store. And once we find the guild, we're going to call set guild. So remember that set guild is coming from guild context, okay? And we're going to call this function, which is going to update guild. And since this is coming from the context, it's going to update it globally, okay? So when we update the guild, it's then going to just pretty much just give us all this stuff. Okay, so you'll see what happens in just a sec. But right now, what we need to do is we need to provide the guild store context. So let's do that, guild store context. I think I accidentally forgot to name this to guild store context provider. There we go. So let's, oh whoops, yeah, there we go. So guild store context provider, it's not going to auto import, that's fine. I will just simply guild, did I name it something else? Oh, guild store context. There we go. All right, perfect. So we have that, and then now for the value, we just pass in guilds and then set guilds. Okay, so now all we do is we just go to our dashboard. Now this is gonna be a little bit tricky because ideally, well, first let's do this, right? Let's first get our guilds, and let's use the context guild store context. Okay, now if I console log this right now, you're gonna see that guilds will be there, right there. Okay, it'll be right there. Now obviously if we were fetching this data from an API, we'd have to have some kind of loading indicator, so we'll worry about that when we get to that point. Okay, but right over here, what we want to do is we want to actually make it so that we want to find the guild and we want to call set guild. Okay, now I'm not sure if you can actually just call set guild like this. I think that's not recommended. Yeah, it will tell you cannot update a component while rendering a different component. So we would actually have to wrap this inside useEffect. Now the problem that I actually was having was when I was using useEffect, it was actually giving me an empty array of guilds. I'm not sure why though. If I refresh, you can see that it's empty, but then it is it's populated. Okay, and it was giving me a lot of issues. I wasn't sure what the problem was, but I did try some stuff out. You can see right now if I refresh though, it seems to work just fine. I don't know what I did before, but right now it seems to work. Before it didn't. I really don't know why now it's working. I am very I don't know. I'm very that is very shocking that it's working now. Well, I'm not gonna complain. It makes what I'm about to do a lot easier then, because before I originally created a hook, a custom hook, and that seemed to have fixed it for me, but it seems like now it's working just fine. Okay, let's not get too excited because we still need to find the guild. So I'm gonna do guild. Let's do find guild. So we're gonna go ahead and do guild.find. We're gonna find it by the guild.id. That's what this function is gonna do. It's gonna, because remember, guilds is an array of guilds. We're gonna go through the guilds and we're gonna find it by ID. I think it'd be better probably if I used a map. It would be, probably faster because .find is a linear function. It's O of n. So we'll take O of n to find it for us. We're getting into time complexity, but if we did a map, it would just be like an O of 1 operation. But you guys don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, so let's set the guild. Okay. So if this actually works, and I don't know why it's working now. Before it was not working. That is so weird. Before I was getting some issues with this, but now it's working. So that's good. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm not gonna complain. Okay, I'm not gonna complain. Let me actually just leave that alone. Okay, and all right. So now you can see what exactly is going on. Okay, you can see. Okay, so now we have another problem. If we actually go to this route, it's going to have us select the guild again, but that's okay because remember, all we need to do is we need to go to all of our pages and we need to fix it accordingly. So for example, right over here, you can see right over here. Let me see if I can. So let me see something real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and because this is right now all the same page. So let me actually see if I can find the parameters real quick. So I think actually this is an entirely different page. Okay, no, never mind. It was just this one page that I didn't have it mapped to anything. But these work the same way as well, because the guild was found. And because the guild is found, you can kind of see that it says select the guild. If I keep refreshing over and over again, you can kind of see it says select the guild. Okay, that's because the guild is currently undefined, but then we find the guild and we update the guild from that's part of the context. Okay, so this is just some, this is a way to kind of take advantage of React context. It's a good way to, again, like I said, global state. We can share it. I mean, some people might not even say it's global state, but it's a good way to store stuff in one place so that you can reference it later very easily. Okay, but yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. Again, this is just the functionality part. It works perfectly. So if I click on this, I can go here, 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 and here. Maybe later on we can make it so that if I were to click on this, it would preserve the actual page. Because right now, if I go from here, if I click on this, it's going to take me to a new thing. Okay, but we'll worry about that later. I think we've done a lot so far. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be it for this second part of the video. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to actually set up our backend. Now, I actually did do a video that shows you how to set up a passport, sessions, all those things on the backend. But for the backend, though, this one is going to be a lot different. We're actually going to be using GraphQL, and I'm going to incorporate TypeORM as well. And I think we're going to be using either Express or Nest.js. I haven't decided yet, but I think likely we're going to play around with a lot of things so you guys can learn a bunch of different things, okay? But yeah, we're going to basically be doing the backend in Node, though. And yeah, that's going to be pretty much it. So hopefully this video made sense to you guys. If you guys like this video, leave a like down below, subscribe, and that's pretty much it. So see you guys in my next video.